Welcome to the Startup of the Year podcast, where each episode we showcase exciting new companies from around the world. This podcast is produced by Established, creators of the Startup of the Year program. Established is focused on helping organizations with their innovation, startup, and communication strategies.
Hello, welcome to the Startup of the Year podcast live. I'm Frank Gruber, the co-founder and co-CEO of Established, as well as the co-founder of Established Ventures, and the team behind the Startup of the Year community. And this very podcast, today I'm super excited to introduce to you Don Berger, if you haven't seen him already. He's an entrepreneur with a very strong background in event planning and just has a really good, interesting background of startups. And he just founded a new company, Assemble. It's a boutique chain of corporate retreat centers designed to enhance team collaboration and productivity. Previously, he founded a company called Social Tables, and it was an event planning platform, a software actually, a company that made huge waves. He was in DC when I met him. It was actually eventually acquired by Cvent for, I think it was around $100 million in 2018. We can confirm that because he's here. And he's also the author of an upcoming book called The Quest, the definitive guide to begin defining belonging. It's set to publish soon. Well, it's October, so maybe it's out. We'll have to talk about that too. And he's also he's got a background of he's got his BA from Hunter College and an MBA from Georgetown University. Super excited to invite or actually welcome Don Berger. Don, thanks so much for being here.
Of course, Frank, it is great to see you. I remember when Tech Cocktail was just a small little startup that you started with Jen. And I think it was one of the first places I actually showcased the startup I was working on. So what an honor to be with you.
Well, I appreciate it and appreciate you bringing that back. And because there is a long lineage, the Startup of the Year actually started as TechCo and started as Tech Cocktail. And we've kind of spun out the community and we're here we are to continue to do what we do. So I appreciate what you were doing back then. And hopefully in some way we added some sparks to what you were doing. So
oh, dude, I remember it to this day. I think it was on K Street and it was in DC and it was this little kind of club restaurant or whatever. And everybody had like a cocktail table, like High Boy. And I had my laptop and I was like demoing the software. And I mean, you and your team have put startups on the map for a decade and a half. And I mean, what a service you've provided.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, it's been something, it's been kind of our something in our gut that's made us do this for a long time. And obviously we're continuing the mission here. Enough about me. Let's talk about you. For those not familiar, I want to hear about Assemble. And can you give us just a quick overview of what the mission kind of has been and how it kind of has transformed, is transforming the team collaboration space with these offsite retreats?
Yeah, I think that so one of the things that myself and many other entrepreneurs can probably relate to is that we believe that the biggest things happen in small rooms. So the industry is always focused on the meetings industry is always focused on attracting and creating the biggest events, the biggest conferences, the biggest experiences, boom, blah, blah, like all this huge stuff, Dreamforce is like this massive. But the reality is the Dreamforce really at the end of the day is a meeting and a meeting and a meeting. It's a bunch of nested meetings. And when you go down to like the core, the biggest things happen in the smallest rooms. The biggest things happen when you're sitting across from people with a small team. So we wanted to take that concept where teams get together and they set goals or they review their annual whatever. Teams are innovating on an idea. Uber does this sabbatical, used to do these sabbaticals where they'd send small teams to like kind of jam out on a project somewhere. So we wanted to take this experience of teams coming together and really like level it up. And by creating basically corporate retreat centers, which is a really tough market because hotels are like, I don't want to F with that. Like that's too small. And Airbnb is like, that market's too small. So there's this kind of like opportunity for 8 to 12 person teams to get together in an exclusive space in a really cool destination to just jam out on whatever they want.
Interesting. Now, does that also include like the room and board for it, or is it just like the place they collaborate?
It's, it's funny. Like I think about it like a 2x2 and obviously we're at the top, right? But I think about like Airbnb is like residential where you go and you bring the team, many of the people listening have probably done this where you're like, let's go to Austin and get an Airbnb. But then you end up like sharing a bathroom or you end up sleeping in a kid's bed or you end up like meeting under a live, laugh, love sign and neon pink. And it's just like not the vibe. and like then you get noise complaints or whatever. And we wanted to provide the full experience, kind of 360, where it is a destination in a really special place in a really historic neighborhood. It's a home that's converted to the flagship one. We'll have 20 by 2030, but the flagship one is 11 rooms, 3 meeting spaces. We actually have a replica of the spaceship Apollo, a huge, like seats 8 people inside the Apollo as like our thing in the back. Every room is inspired by a physicist, so it's kind of unique. And yeah, and then on top of that, we don't just provide the room and board. We also provide what is called in the industry a DMC, or a destination management company, where we provide services that essentially do retreat design. So whatever you want to go snowboarding, you want to go hiking, you want to go bring a sound bath, whatever you want, we will handle that, from the food to the transport to everything in between. And we just take a 20% commission on top of that. We handle all the payments. So it's literally a concierge kind of like meeting in a box.
Yeah, that's great. And that obviously will take some stress off of some teams. Also, think about like the staff that you'd have to do the retreat focused
That's
on
right.
that, right? That's a lot. So obviously that's a great model. It sounds like. Where's the first one going to be?
It's in Boise, Idaho, and we're addressing this kind of gap where it's like you hit the nail on the head. It's a lot of people who are not like they're occasional planners or accidental planners. It's the manager, it's the director, the chief of staff, it's the EA who does all this other stuff, or it's the HR or ops
Or
coordinator.
COO, even if it's smaller.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. It's like
Yeah,
doing all
yeah,
this stuff,
yeah.
and it's like they don't like that's a lot. The last thing they want to do is like book a historic tour downtown or like a snowboarding afternoon. They don't want to do that. So
Yeah.
we will do everything for them. So the first one's in Boise. And I think what's really special about this from like a mission perspective is we're focused on what the industry unfortunately refers to as secondary and tertiary markets. So not the sexy Austin, Nashville, New York, LA, but like, the kind of up and coming cities, the kind of cities that you wouldn't think of. So Boise is our first one, and we're not going to, I'm not going to tell you the laundry list of where we're going because we don't know.
Right.
We are open to anywhere as long as there's something exciting in the area. Boise obviously is incredible for nature and all these recreational activities, like from rafting to snowboarding. But it can be anywhere that has these different unique activations. It's got to be in a historic district downtown. It's gotta have at least 12 to 15 direct flights from major metros. So that's the kind of criteria we're looking at.
Great. That makes sense. And obviously I was thinking I'm up in Maine, like Portland, Maine might be good. I don't know if they have as many flights.
Yeah, yeah.
That's like the kind of market that could leverage that pretty great because a lot of people come up.
And especially this time of year. I mean, with the
Yeah, it's
foliage and
perfect.
oh
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
I
And then
remember when you were in Vegas.
I was, that was I was there for 8 years, if you can believe that. It's a lot of really interesting times over there, and a lot of
Because you
memories.
were there at the height of like Tony,
Yep,
and Zappos and like
yep,
downtown. I mean, you were in
yep,
it.
yep. We were his neighbor, and he invested in Techco. So,
Wow.
that's why we were hosting a lot of events and partnered with their organization to do a lot of different
Well, I'm
retreats.
sorry for your loss
Yeah,
and
appreciate that. Yeah,
passing.
it was a really sad, obviously, kind of denouement of the whole thing, and just kind of but we got out in 2019. After we sold Techco, we moved out to well, we stayed an extra year, and then we decided, okay, where we want to be, and we looked at other places, and ultimately wanted to be in Maine. Jen's from Maine,
How
and
did you decide on Maine?
yeah, Jen grew up here, and she's got
Okay.
family here. So once you have a child, it really changes your perspective on a lot of
Totally.
things. And a child that I should say was born in Las Vegas. Like
Right.
you're like, okay, so mainly I'm saying that because if you ever try to keep a child alive in 120-degree temperatures, you start to think about a lot of things.
Wow.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
totally.
So
Totally.
it changed your perspective, and God bless everyone that does it. There's a lot of people living in that area or in Arizona or any of these places that are really warm, Texas or whatever. It can be a challenge. So anyway, it's been good. But yeah, I was thinking because of Boston's proximity too, you've got a lot of people that come through here, and it's an hour away, so there's a lot of opportunity there. So anyway, keep
Awesome.
it on your radar. All right, so moving along here, you've got a lot of great, obviously with great success with social tables and you've been a leader in this event hospitality space for a while. Can you share a little bit more about how maybe that experience led to what you're doing now? Was there, as you were doing it, was there like, oh, we need this, we figured out this niche, or
Yeah.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but what really inspired you to focus, on this kind of productive offsite space?
You know, so just background for the listeners, I started Social Tables in 2011, raised nearly $30 million through a Series B. I sold it we were doing 20 million in ARR roughly, and
Wow.
we had about 120 employees and not about 6,000 customers, like small bit, like enterprise level customers paying small dollars. So ACV, average contract value, was like $3,000. It wasn't a lot.
Mhm.
And
But can you explain what it was so that people know, because they may not know?
yeah, so the software.
Yeah.
Yeah, the software was basically AutoCAD for events. So it was event design software. It was a relatively new category, and it was
Mhm.
collaborative CAD software for events. So figuring out, and it had different features and new products, but the core product was basically setting up an event from the ceiling to the floor to the walls, and figuring out everything from fire code to everything, staging and seating.
Yeah, great. And then
So
yeah,
through that, the software was used to plan 1.5 million events per year.
wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
And 3 billion square feet of meeting space were mapped out in our proprietary kind of mapping tool.
Holy
Uh,
smoke. Yeah. So
yeah.
you built that very quickly. I mean, so when did it get, so you're starting 2011, where were you at when you got to that? So 2018. So I say quickly, but that was about 7 years, 6, 7 years.
I mean, the general kind of the joke is like the 7-year itch. We heard
Right.
that about marriage, and we hear that
Right.
about
Right.
VCs.
Right.
They get kind of bored with you after 5 to 7 years,
Mhm.
because they have funds to kind of like replenish and show
Mhm.
returns on. So
Mhm.
it was, so my number was always 100 million,
Mhm.
and we got that offer and we took it, and now the business is doing super well. I mean, at Cvent, which has been a great steward of that business, its recurring revenue is I mean, fuck it, I'll just
Yeah.
share. It's like probably about 45 million.
Wow.
So it more than doubled. So
Congrats.
that's a
That's
great
a huge
investment. Yeah,
success. Yeah, that's a
great
huge
investment
success.
for them. Great outcome for me and everybody else involved.
Yeah.
We
First
created
time founder too, right?
million.
Like you hadn't started a company prior to that,
No,
right?
first time. And yeah, we
Yeah.
created 5 millionaires out of that, 4 or 5 millionaires. And then and everybody, it was an employment company, so everybody got a check.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, basically, like, look, so from the time I sold, it was like 2018 I sold, 2019 I left, and then 2020, and then I was in the process of purchasing meetup.com, and I had an LOI signed for purchasing it for $80 million. And then that deal fell apart in Q1 of 20, deal fell apart during diligence, but then COVID hit and I dodged a bullet. Uh,
Yeah.
uh,
Wow.
so that was when WeWork was spinning off Meetup.
Yep. Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
and then an investor, a guy who started DoubleClick, named Kevin Ryan, bought it.
Mhm.
He bought it as really a favor to the CEO, given the situation that the world was going through, and obviously the valuation hit that companies like Meetup took. And then it was purchased by Bending Spoons, which owns Evernote, a few months ago, for roughly the same price that I was going to buy it. I think that's not on that knowledge, I'm assuming. But yeah, so I was going to buy Meetup, and then that didn't work. And then I ran a music festival for a little bit, and that was like, like that was, it wasn't the right fit. I was an investor. I was
Sounds
like,
fun. It sounds
yeah, it
fun.
was fun. I was like, I was an investor, so like, I was like, let me run this, and then I was like, I didn't do well working with creatives,
Mhm.
and then I was like, and then COVID hit, and I was like, fuck.
Mhm.
So between 2020 and 2024, I just kind of did what's called like what Bob Buford in his book Halftime calls halftime, and basically I kind of said, okay, if the first half of my life was social tables and all that shit, and
Mhm.
what's the second half of my life going to be? I got this time for halftime where I go
Mhm.
back in the locker room and regroup and re-strategize. And that's when I kind of realized, going back to your question around what started Assemble, when I realized, I never had a sense of belonging, and I got my sense of belonging through social tables. I mean, you were in DC. I mean, that was
Yeah.
like we had a pretty like vibrant environment. So I was like, well, I never had belonging outside of work. So what do I need to do to find it? And I went through a lot of just like a research, and that's where I came to writing the book, The Quest. which I subtitled The Definitive Guide to Finding Belonging, because unlike the crap you'll read from like Brene Brown or Eckhart Tolle or all these people or Elizabeth Gilbert, like I actually tell you how to find belonging. I don't just say connect with nature or God and you'll find belonging. I actually say, here's what you do. Here's the research. Here's a customized approach for your personality type. And what I realized is like all this crap around belonging and culture is actually not the answer. It's about belonging on teams.
Mhm.
And then how do you create belonging on teams? Well, you give them an offsite and then they achieve great things. So that is the
Oh, interesting.
ontology of the offsite company.
Wow.
In a
So
very, very long answer.
no, that it takes time to get through like how you got there. And I think that's wow, that's really makes sense and as eye-opening, obviously, for like how you got there. But I'm curious, when does the book come out? Is it out now or
November 19th.
November? Okay, great. November
And
19th.
if any listener gets in touch with me, where you my contact info is everywhere, I will happily send you a few free chapters if you want to check it out.
Great. Awesome. Congrats on the book too. That's very
Thank
exciting.
you. I'm
That's
trying to follow in your footsteps.
it's hard to do, man. No, not this following footsteps part. The writing a book part is hard to do.
I know.
Uh,
I heard the quote that writing a book is 90% reading your work because you're like, what the
yeah,
fuck was I saying? What the hell was that? Like,
yeah, yeah, it is. It is, and it takes time to go through. And if you do the audio too, that's even harder. I don't know if you ever had to read a
I
book.
did do I just did that first half and I listened to it. I'm like, God, I suck. So then I redid the first half.
It's just you don't realize how hard it is to be perfect every time you read something.
Right. And then you're just like, and you sound like a robot. And then you're
Yep.
like, where is my personality?
Yes. Exactly. Exactly. So credit to all those voiceovers out there that can read.
Right. Well,
Yeah,
actually, it's funny. Like I had a contract for an audiobook and I was like, you know what? Give me my $6,000 back. I'm going to do it myself.
I appreciate that. I think it's actually better. I think it's because
Totally.
you can feel the story coming through you, and that's
That's
why
right.
I did mine too. And I like it. It did take longer, but I think all in all it's better. So, congrats on that too. So look
Thank
out for
you.
that soon, November. And I guess with that, you mentioned belonging and what kind of fosters, I guess with that belonging, like teams, I just mentioned is what kind of brings it together, but what's that guiding philosophy, that you're now thinking, okay, now how do we get that to kind of come through in our spaces, I guess I mean, you're bringing people together, but what else are
Yeah.
you doing to kind of make you design that experience? Oh, and we've got a
Yeah.
dog.
Yeah. This is Mozzarella. She's a great Pyrenees. That is a miniature version. She is the
Oh,
wonderful.
awesome.
She's the sweetest.
You're
So
making me hungry at mozzarella.
you don't eat my dog. So, you know, yeah, it's it's a very big question. Let me try to take it. Let me try to nibble at it. So
Okay.
the first thing is, I think for most people to have belonging in an organizational capacity, as I kind of alluded to earlier, they need to have belonging in their personal lives. You will not going to work, and a lot of young people go to work to find belonging. Going to work to find belonging will set you up for failure because belonging is going to end as soon as that employee contract ends. So
Mhm.
I think about work, the workplace is a platform for belonging and not necessarily a place to find belonging. And what I mean by that is it's to find the relationships, it's to have the daily interactions. And I talk in the book about the 6 fuels to find belonging. And I go through each one and there's a bonus chapter for work and I talk about how to implement each fuel in the workplace. But it's the number one is you need to find belonging outside of work in order to have belonging with a team professionally. And assuming everybody has that, then the number there and I go and I lay out a critical path to create belonging on a team. But the
Mhm.
first step is hospitality. And when there's hospitality and there's warmth and there's curiosity and there is an environment that is welcoming, it just kind of it's a heart opener. And I think so that's why at Assemble, it's a hospitality company. And we start with hospitality. And that
Right.
means it's like treating, from the moment an opportunity comes in, it's like, how do we make the experience hospitable? So it starts with hospitality. And then there are several phases after that. The next phase after hospitality is safety, making sure that that's where DEI shows up. That's where we make sure people there's an equitable environment. And then it's engagement, making sure everybody's engaged. That's the equity part. And then it's inclusion part, excuse me. And
Mhm.
then following that is commitment. There's organizational commitment. And those are the steps to get to belonging. So it starts with hospitality, goes on to safety, continues to engagement, moves to commitment, and ends with belonging. And
Yeah.
that's the critical path.
And you're hoping that through the spaces and the things you set up, you're going to be able to create, kind of knock each one of those pillars out.
Well, I think we can certainly start with hospitality. We
Yeah.
can certainly create safety by giving everybody a private room, by giving different meeting spaces that work for different people. Um, we can certainly share tools and technologies, and if they choose facilitation, then facilitation that ensures there's participation. We can't force people to be committed to the team, and we can't
Right.
force belonging on anybody. And that's
Right.
part of the problem in today's culture is that belonging is a talking point for HR teams and
Right.
CEOs where belonging doesn't work that way. I can't tell you need to belong here.
Mhm.
You need to feel like you belong here. And I
Right.
can't force that. I can force diversity. I can force equity. I can force inclusion. I can measure that stuff.
Yeah.
Belonging is really up to the individual, no matter, and if they're not open to that, then no matter what I do, I won't make you feel like you belong.
Right. Yeah. And so in doing so, you got to kind of start with comfort, like getting people comfortable to be able to kind of let the guard down a little bit to feel like they belong
That's
at
right.
work.
And one of those ways to do that is to get out, like by choosing to have an offsite, you're taking that first step.
Right.
It's like,
And
let's
a
get
lot of
out of
people
the
are.
court.
I mean, a lot of
Yeah,
companies are. I mean,
that's right.
I did some quick research and I was trying to get a number on the number of retreats out there. And unfortunately, it's challenging because, per year, like a lot of people don't report when they have retreats, right? Not everyone does that. So, there's some quick numbers. Approximately 43% of companies organized two or more retreats in 2022, and 56% also incorporated mini retreats into their wellness program. So
Oh,
that's
I've
a lot.
never heard that. That's really awesome.
Yeah, and it's an estimated $510 billion is what they're expecting this market to be by 2030. So seems like they're
Incredible. Well,
going with a
so we
good
have
trend.
hydrotherapy in every location. So there's cold
Oh wow.
plunges,
Oh, I love that.
saunas, and hot tub, like 13-person hot tubs. Um, of course, not everybody wants to get in a bathing suit with their coworkers.
Right.
Totally get it. And again, that's about the safety. But one of the things I think is important when you're doing a retreat is to balance intimacy and privacy. You have
Right.
privacy by having en suites in every room and a desk and all that stuff. But then you have intimacy where you create collisions within the space, an open kitchen, different meeting areas, outdoors, and so
Mhm.
forth. So, I think a lot of folks, I think it starts by realizing, okay, we're a hybrid workforce, we're a remote team. How do we get together? Or even if we're within the four walls of a shitty corporate office, how do we get out of this in order to foster belonging? And I think it starts by making the decision to do a retreat
Right.
or an offsite.
And then I guess how do you balance that? Like you've got those pillars. How do you balance like making sure people feel the belonging? You're kind of hitting those pillars, but you're also trying to, I mean, from a corporate perspective, trying to like get some kind of momentum in some area, whether it be talking through a new plan or working through some kind of project, or is that just doesn't make sense in these types of environments?
So, sorry, I'm sorry.
I guess my point is like, with some of the corporate retreats I've been to, and there's usually like some kind of like top line agenda, like,
Yes.
how do we get through that too? And all, what's the right balance, I guess?
It's not like I guess we can become thought leaders in this issue, but we don't think of our job as to make sure you have a successful retreat. We think of our job as to facilitate success.
Right.
And I think, should you choose to work with one of our facilitators, which we will offer, again, we take 20% off whatever they charge and you pay, and it's your decision. I have always found that having an outside facilitator is much more helpful than a leader trying to also not just balance contribution, but also management of the meeting. It's really hard to use both sides of the brain. That's why
Mhm.
sales engineers exist. It's like you need somebody to ask the questions and you need somebody to demo the product. So for the same reason, you need facilitation and you need participation, and it's really hard to wear both hats. But at the end of the day, like there's only so much we can do to unlock success. But I believe that there's a higher probability of success when you choose a solution or a product like ours.
Yeah. What are some mistakes that you've seen? Just, I don't know if you've seen any yet, but just in general, I guess that
So
the
we're
company.
not open yet.
Right.
We opened June 1st on Boise.
Okay.
We have hosted some day meetings.
Hmm.
Uh, and mistakes that I would say, um, apart from the one I just talked about, where an individual is try to facilitate and participate,
Oh, right. Yeah.
I would say another one is not thinking about doing an offsite and doing an onsite.
Hmm.
Um, I think about Cvent, for example. I was part of some on-sites they did, and Cvent is a very frugal company, so they always had their off-sites on-site in the corporate boardroom of the building they were in Tyson's Corner, Virginia.
Mhm.
And you can just imagine kind of like, being in that boxy kind of like sterile environment. I think it's about, I think that's a mistake, is not investing money in it. I think that any good offsite does have a team building component that is
Mhm.
congruent with the vibe and culture of that. I think another mistake is having alcohol. I
Mhm.
don't think alcohol is conducive to the work. I don't think it should be offered. And this is something I've gone back on. Like, I don't think it should be offered to employees. I don't think it's responsible.
Mhm.
Uh, and I think it's counterproductive. So I think that's another mistake. Um, yeah, I think those are kind of the things I would. And I would probably say also just kind of like thinking you can do it all yourself.
Yeah.
Like if you're like, okay, I'll book this, I'll book that. You don't know, most people don't know half the things that exist in the city they've never been to.
Mhm.
And I think again, it's about increasing the probability of success. And one of those things is to outsource in
Right.
order to make sure you're successful.
Right. And you've been at the forefront of events for a while now. I'm curious, what are some of the most exciting trends you've seen, or maybe that you're pulling from as you build this out? Is there anything that comes to mind? You're like, oh, I saw that, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting, and I want to like
So
incorporate
I'm
it.
kind of stale
Mhm.
because I have took this kind of like hiatus.
Right.
I would say some of the trends are number one, and this is where I would lean on my business partner, Brittany Cobb, who's a hospitality expert and a meeting planner.
Mhm.
But I would say number one is the rise of secondary cities. People are going to new places in order to kind of getting out of the normal destinations. That's definitely a trend that's on the rise. Um, I would say another trend is, making sure there's sober, like for the sober curious, or for the sober folks. That's another trend, is not having alcohol,
Right.
um, or having non-alcoholic options.
Mhm.
Um, I think a lot of people, want more interactive. So another trend would be not bringing a talking head, but bringing like an actual somebody who understands experiential learning and adult learning. It's very different than kind of traditional learning. I would say those are some of the trends. I mean, of course, there are always technology trends, but I would say those are the trends.
Yeah, and I think some of the other trends I was thinking about while you were talking was like
Yeah.
microeconomic, like, the environment, that we're in, our, travel budgets have been, I think they've been somewhat tight for people. I'm curious, you know, how you can, how companies may approach like offsites, right? Like,
Mhm.
is
Oh,
that
I can
something?
I can tell you right now.
Yeah.
I mean, so first of all, I think that while budgets are tight,
Mhm.
corporate profits and the market is performing really well. So I think we're telling ourselves a story that is not necessarily, and that's everybody's doing it. I mean, people are running campaigns on this, presidential campaigns on this. So I think part of us is telling a story.
Mhm.
Another part, though, is not kind of reconsidering budgets. There's no reason why we can't appropriate, move what we used for real estate budgets towards event budgets. That would
Right.
be the logical kind of place. If I'm no longer have an office, then I'm taking, which was the gathering budget, so to speak. Let's
Mhm.
repurpose that gathering budget towards gathering. So that's kind
That's a
of like
great
one
point. I mean,
example of it.
with the
Yeah,
rise
those
of remote hybrid work, right? The
right,
people don't have the office expense, but that's been removed from the budget,
that's
and
right.
and so it doesn't even get thought. I mean, I feel like it's quickly been forgotten, and now we're like in a position where people are like, oh, we don't have the budget for it, or we can't afford it, or whatever. So maybe that's a great place to
And on
pull.
top of that, even if there are hybrid workforces and they still have a corporate office, they're not renewing as much square footage.
Right,
So the real estate budget, even it might not be gone, but it's certainly shrinking. And I'm not
right.
trying to disparage. It's probably moved to co-working spaces. It's probably moved to some perks, but
Mhm.
there is room. There is room. And like one of the things you can think about is, for example, we're going to do an offsite with a day where you can bring your family before or after or whatever. You can plug it into a vacation and maybe so there's just innovative stuff that people can do in order to unlock the power of retreats and offsites.
I think that's an interesting one. Part of the reason there's such a calling, or people are kind of throwing their hands up when a lot of companies are going back to the office, I think, is because of flexibility and because of family, right? Like having a family, you need the flexibility a little bit more, and now you're like kind of getting pushed back in. And so I guess I'm saying is, yeah, that's I totally agree with you. Like that's that can be really interesting if you're setting up your retreat and then you're also now tacking out and making it an opportunity for people to maybe take a little vacation.
Yeah, and actually, one of the trends that has been observed is that business travel leads to leisure travel in that specific city. Because what happens is people go somewhere and they're for business, like, oh, this city's pretty cool, and then they come back with their family. People used to think it's the other way around, but
Mhm.
the numbers show that it's business leads to leisure.
Business first, then family. Family
Story
vacation.
of my life.
Yeah, right. All right. So switching gears, we're going to talk about entrepreneurship. Obviously it's not easy. You experienced it, but I wanted to understand your journey with social tables and kind of walk us through kind of that experience and like as a first time, entrepreneur, like what are some of those experiences that were kind of hard to kind of get into, transition into, and then ultimately do? And what are some of those challenges you faced? I mean, it's probably hard out of the moment, but I'm sure you've had many of a hill to climb.
Well, I think I had some challenges and I had some really good things going for me. So an example of a challenge is and I will kind of talk about how I repurposed it. So one challenge, for example, is I was an only founder. And I'm not saying that because I didn't have a business partner. I had a business partner early on named Matt, and Matt and I kind of started working on social tables January 2011, and then we kind of started parting ways. He was unable to leave his job at the time. I think he was a little more risk averse, and I was like all in. So the kind of delta between our commitment continued to widen. And 6 months in, I decided to buy him out. And you
Mhm.
may remember Adam Zuckerman from DC.
Yeah.
He actually mediated between the meeting between Matt and I, where we agreed on a $10,000 and 5% deal, where I paid him $10,000 and took 5% and he took 5% of the business. And when I sold, it was diluted to 1%, but he made $1 million.
Wow.
Uh, so the first thing is kind of doing it alone. That was a real challenge. But the way I solved for that is twofold. First one is I was technical. I'm an engineer by I'm not an engineer by engineer by self-teaching, not by a study. So I was able to serve also as like CTO. So the first thing I think is like, and for those who can't, they're like, I need a technical co-founder. I need somebody to build this shit. Like you got to figure that out first. And now there's no excuse with all the no code stuff. So like I would say that was an opportunity for me to like wear both hats. But what I did with Matt, because Matt left, I then thought about I started thinking about late co-founders and bringing on people later on, and the company having these founding moments led by really special people. And one of those people, the two people that come to mind, for example, are Trevor Lynn and Ron Parimi, who I consider my co-founders today. I actually remember to this day, Trevor and I had lunch on a Sunday, and I got all emotional. I was like, "Will you be my co-founder?" And this was like a couple years in.
Mhm.
So I think there's nothing wrong with giving people that title later on as they work towards it.
Yeah.
Founders doesn't have to be like day one.
Mhm.
So I would say that's another challenge is like going at it alone, but after that, becoming a team. Um, I would say another one is really finding the signals through the noise. When you're early on, one of the most famous kind of lines is, you know what you should do? And like, you know, um, um, yeah, so like it was especially in like DC tech where like everybody thinks they know better than you because everybody's got an ego, present company included, and everybody tells you what to do. So I think a really important skill set for entrepreneurs is separating the signals from the noise because there's a lot of noise, but there's always going to be signals.
Yeah, that's
Um,
great.
Another thing I think is really leveraging your network for success. So I'll share with you something.
Mhm.
Um, I took all the emails I've ever corresponded with, through my inbox, and I was able to extract all those emails using some software and AI. And now I'm now using Rocket Reach, which is enriching software, to not only find the new emails for folks whose email has decayed, but also find out what they are up to right now. And that, I have 8,000 people I've interacted with in my Gmail.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Those are 8,000 warm leads. Of course, there's
Yeah.
there's some X's in there. There's some maybe bill
Right.
collectors. There's like employees I had a falling out with, but whatever. You can always take those out.
Mhm.
Using the network we currently have, it's free. And there's thousands of people in it. And it's not just about posting to LinkedIn, it's actually extracting all that. So that's another kind of like thing I would, urge people to do. Those are the things that come to mind, Frank. I'm happy to think of more, but
Yeah, no,
those
those are good ones. I mean, relationships matter, and obviously, when you have a network like you do, um, you can obviously cultivate that and turn that into something. And
but a lot
obviously,
of people are sitting on that gold mine. Is kind of my point. Is like,
yeah, absolutely.
you just need the tooling to do to do that.
Yeah, you're right. You're exactly right. And especially when you're first getting going too, is you're looking for those friends and family, folks that get involved, supporters, and maybe that little army that you're trying to grow. Now I can't remember. Did you go through? I can't remember if you went through an accelerator or what you
Yep,
went
we
through.
did. Well, we were a 500 startups company
That's what
on
I
the
thought. Yeah,
portfolio side, but then we were also a Fortify company through the Ford Accelerator,
I
which
remember. Yeah.
unfortunately only had one class. However, what's fascinating about the Ford is that their hit rate is incredible. I mean,
Mhm.
Hinge was there, and everybody knows Hinge. So that was a success. Social Tables was there. That was a success. I'm sure if you ask the GPs, they probably had others, but like that's pretty good. Like 2 out of 12 companies, like
That's fantastic.
to have
Yeah.
like multi-million-dollar exits, that's pretty good.
No, that's really good. And obviously good timing. They had really, that there was something happening in DC that timing, I feel like too. Like,
Absolutely.
yeah, so that was very exciting
Something
time.
in the air.
Yep, exactly.
I I think it was like the Obama bump.
Maybe.
Like 2008 saw a lot of people moving to DC to be with the president, to serve the president, to
Oh,
be
true.
around
Yeah.
that energy. And that's kind of like when DC,
Yeah.
and DC is in a bubble because like during a recession, there's so much government spending that it's kind of in a bubble and it's recession proof. So it was a safe space to be in the recession. There were a lot of smart people coming in for the administration. And that's kind of the renaissance that started DC, which wasn't just arts and culture and food. It was also startups.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. All right. So I'm continuing the line of kind of I want to talk about belonging too, but I want to talk a little more about startup kind of stuff. A lot of our audience are startup founders. Um, you know, you gave some good advice and some of the challenges. I guess I want to talk a little bit more about when's the right time, I guess, for an entrepreneurial company or something to start doing these offsites. When do you think is a good time? Because it's part of the culture, right? You're building
I mean,
culture.
dude, like, so Stephen Covey, who's like one of the most, kind of
Yeah.
coveted business writers, uh, has this quote, which I'll butcher, but it's basically people uh, do what people act out what they're a part of creating. And I'm reminded when Uber was faced with all these scandals. I remember Travis Kalanick trying to save the company, and he had a town hall and he introduced like 11 new core values to the company in front of like, I don't know, let's just call it 10,000 employees. I was like, we are now going to be integrity. We are safe, whatever the hell he said. And it's like, dude, values are not, we like, sure, entrepreneurs embody their values, and more likely than not, the company will have the values of the entrepreneur integrated into the culture. That's a given. But if you're not creating values from the team and with the team, no one's going to buy into that. And the way you create values, the way you create vision, the way you create mission is you do it as a team. And that's when the offsite is perfect for, is something like that. So my answer is when you have a team, as soon as you have a team, you start doing the offsites.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have to, again, it doesn't have to be like whatever. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. But whenever you're goal setting, like I said, the biggest things happen in the smallest rooms. And if you're doing goal setting, you're setting a vision that happens when you bring your team together for something like an offsite on an annual or quarterly basis.
Yeah, that makes sense too. Curious, are you getting
And by the way, Frank, on that point, you know, everything at Social Tables, our vision statement, our core values has gone through multiple iterations. There's a V1, V2, V3, and every time it was employee led
Mhm.
exercise. Every time.
Yeah.
And
Where
I
did
talk about that in the bonus chapter about work in my book. More.
Yeah, I love to dig into that a little more because we were stationed in Culture City basically for 8 years with Tony Shea and Zappos and all the stuff they were doing. He was kind of known for culture um, with his book and everything. And I'm curious, where did you pull that from? How did you know culture was so important?
Yeah.
And
No, okay. So this is a fantastic question, and I really don't mean to toot my own horn, but it was in my intuition, and I'll tell you where that intuition came from. And I get chills talking about this, but being belongingless my whole life, I wanted to create that belonging for myself and for the people that were there. And and again, one of the things I started in the book is these belonging traumas that I personally had, and my pain is at a maximum, and your pain's at a maximum, and everybody else's pain is at a maximum because we don't have people's pain. But my pain was the fact I was adopted and I didn't have a belonging with a biological family. My pain was that my adopted parents divorced when I was 2, and I didn't have a nuclear family. My pain was when we immigrated to this country from Israel when I was 8, and I didn't speak a word of English, and I was thrown into a new culture, and I had to negotiate multiple identities. That's my pain. And all that's related to not feeling belonging, and all that leads me to want it that much more. And
wow,
to
that's a lot. That's a lot to unpack as, a 2 to 8 year old,
That's
like,
right. That's
yeah,
right. And
yeah.
arguably in utero, when you are getting cortisol from your biological mother who's mentally ill, and my mom was mentally ill, and that's why today I was, recently I've been diagnosed with bipolar and other mental. It's just so like I was passed that on. So imagine what happens in utero to a baby that like is kind of communicated chemically that they don't belong in with the mother that is about to give birth to it.
Right. Yeah, that's really, that's deep. And obviously it was I guess in you from the beginning
That's
is
right.
what
So,
you're
where did I
saying.
get this stuff? It was like I never felt it, so I wanted to make sure everybody felt it. And the
Mhm,
problem is, Frank, that I almost did it. I did it over the top.
mhm,
I went above and beyond. And I'll give you an example. I'd get mad at employees for not going to company events, for example. I'd resent them. I'd hold a grudge against them. Just
mhm,
being honest. I'll just tell you. And like that was wrong because I did not realize that different people had different ways to find belonging. There are different belonging personas. I talk about this in the book. There are 4 belonging personas: eager, anxious, reluctant, independent. If you go to
mhm.
belongingquest.com, you can take a quiz to find out yours with some
Oh, cool.
tips on what to do. But like, I didn't think about that. I didn't realize people had like, a house of worship they might go to, a rec league they might be a part of, a
Mhm,
marriage that's important to them. Like I didn't think about any of that stuff. I was like, if you belong here, show me, show me.
mhm.
And that was a mistake, and that created some othering, I think. But I also talk in the book about if everybody belongs, no one belongs. So like there is this kind of like important to create some exclusivity around a culture and make sure that, you know, similar people are there for the most part. So anyway, I was so gung ho on belonging that I sometimes created an unsafe space. And I now understand how to manage that a little better.
Yeah, and you know, it's probably even changed now, right? Like that was 10 years
Yes.
ago or so, and
Yeah.
now we've got remote work and
The
flexible
pendulum is swung.
schedule. Yeah, and some people are doing, different hours, and it's become harder to figure out. Like, back in the day, it was like be in the office at this time, and that's how we know everyone's
Right.
in, right?
Right.
And now it's like you're online. It's
Right.
hard to know. Yeah. So I'm
And,
curious
yeah.
if
And
you
to that point,
yeah.
it's like it's the pendulum has swung to the point where it's like it's not that important anymore.
Mhm,
The culture is not necessarily if people view work as transactional, then
mhm,
belonging in people's personal lives is more important than ever.
mhm. Yeah.
And but we have, as Pete Buttigieg coined during the New Yorker festival he was interviewed at in 2019, we have a belonging crisis. And you can
Mhm,
listen to the Surgeon General about the loneliness epidemic,
yeah.
but a belonging crisis is a result of a loneliness epidemic. It's a result of isolation. It's a result of like incel culture. It's a result of, you know, this kind of that frankly, when you have rising equity and equality, there are some people who are going to feel downtrodden. So it's
Right.
all these things compounded that create a belonging crisis. And that's why I talk about people have to find it on their own. It's not going to be a top-down thing. It's going to be
Mhm.
bottom up.
Yeah.
everybody going on their own quest to find it.
I have one more question, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience because we're
Sure.
getting tight on time here. But this is, I mean, fascinating. I feel like, I mean, you could literally go out and just be the guy behind belonging, right? You're seeing a lot more people talk about it, and obviously loneliness is something they talk about more. But I guess my point was, how do you see this playing into culture when we are now all asynchronous, right? A lot of people are asynchronous, and we're all connected all the time, and we're like always doing stuff. Like, how do you, you know, how do you how do you get people to, or how do you get, I don't say that's not the right framing, but like, how do you get people to be all in, I guess is my point. And have,
Well,
and
I
get that
think,
sense of belonging in that kind of
yeah.
environment. It's harder remote, and that's, I'm thinking about it from the remote perspective, but also like different cities, like different time zones, like I don't know. I think
No, I
it's
mean, I think it's complex and nuanced. I think I kind of go back. So I think the way to do that is
Mhm,
to not focus on it in an inauthentic way.
mhm,
And I think what it is, I would say it's to understand how people, in order to do belonging in a way that's right for you, in a way that fits you, in a way that's authentic to you and your culture, you first need to understand how people go about doing it. And it starts for every person, it starts with what the Stoics have always said, which is know thyself. And when people understand their belonging style and how they find belonging, whether it's through watching TV and connecting with fictional characters, or whether it's going to or following influencers in a one-way kind of thing, whether it's leaving YouTube comments and having these parasocial bonds with folks, whether it's going to a book club, whether it's spending time with their family, whether it's saying hi to random people on the street, different people find belonging differently. And you need to understand that before you kind of just try to ram some sort of culture down people's throats.
yeah,
And that's the key. And then once you do it, once you understand that, you can create a way that you can create a belonging culture that works for your team, and understand how to facilitate that.
yeah.
So that's
Because
kind of,
I guess the other challenge is trying to work it in when you've got all these different competing, like you just said, people have different ways that they manage their time now, and some care more about family, some care more about, team, some care more about the work, like whatever it is, right? And so you're balancing all these people's team members kind of different kind of norms, right? And what they're looking for.
and yeah, I think a lot of employees are realizing the BS that's coming out of corporate America. It's like the corporate America slogans, it's everywhere. It's like, you belong here, we belong. It's all this bullshit. And then on top of that, they're like, oh, why don't you join the affinity group that we started for Jews, or black people? It's like, come on, all the black employees get together and have lunch. I mean, that's
Mhm.
like, I don't think that's like not authentic. And just because meet another Jewish guy doesn't mean we have a lot of, like, we sure we're both Jews. Like, what else? Like, okay, great.
Yeah,
Like, it's not, it's just faux, it's fake.
yeah,
And people need to do it in a way that's authentic to their culture. And frankly, it also involves saying no to people. Like, so for example, there are many companies that are like, everybody belongs here. And then there are a bunch of underperformers who do a shitty job and are still in their role. You mean to tell me that that person belongs here? Like,
hmm,
what? I mean, how disingenuous can you be? Are we a high
right,
performing culture or not?
right,
So it's about this what Bria Parker calls conscious exclusivity in her book, The Art of Gathering. That's the idea. But you have to define what works for you. So there's things we can settle on. There's things we're going to agree on, things that we're not. So for example, we might be a work first culture, and that's fine. That means that different types of belongers still belong here, but we're a work first culture.
yeah,
So it's about that balancing act between the different personality types, the different belonging types, and the culture and the priorities that we have as an organization.
yeah. That's great. All right, switching gears, we're going to ask. There's some questions from the audience that came in, and I'm looking at them here. Here's one. What's something you've learned throughout your career that completely took you by surprise? A lesson you didn't expect, but turned out to be essential in building your successful company.
Oh my God.
That's,
Something
that's a
that took
good
me by
question.
surprise.
Yeah.
Took me by surprise how um, experienced people are not always the best people. the best colleagues I had on my exec team were green as fuck.
Mhm.
Like, like that's the truth. Dude, most of my, like first time executive roles, hired from, inside the company to like Will Henry, who ran customer success. Dude, I think he worked at J. Crew before like a star, like, you know, Ron Perimi, my head of sales, who got us to $10 million ARR. Dude was a sales rep for Eventbrite. Trevor Lynn, never had a real job, worked at Living Social as an intern, became our CMO, getting us to 20 million ARR.
Wow.
Um, I'm,
They're hungrier. They're hungrier.
yeah,
I mean,
Derek Haller, our head of product.
yeah.
It just goes on and on. These are folks. So I would just say, but you got to have, the I think about trust in three different components of trust. Competency, can they do it? Reliability, do they do it? And sincerity, do they want to do it? And a lot of experienced folks um, lack one or more of those qualities.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, that's one thing that surprised me is how crappy experienced executives were. And that's probably my shitty luck.
All right. And moving along here, got a couple more questions and then we'll wrap here. Handling, let's see. This one's about it's about handling. We kind of talked about that already. Um, Actually, this one's about work-life balance. Um, you've experienced now a couple companies, and how do you balance the demands of being an entrepreneur and maintaining a healthy personal life? Any strategies to achieve this
Honestly,
balance?
I think entrepreneurs in the first 10 years cannot have a work-life balance. I just don't like I take a Gary Vaynerchuk approach, who was kind enough to give me a quote from my book. Like some people call it hustle porn, whatever you want to call it. I don't think you can get ahead if you don't bust your ass. So fine, I understand people have a life. I think about a work-life integration. When the Starbucks CEO, who's recently disgraced by, said he left because the company was doing so poorly. He said, "Oh, I don't take emails," or whatever he said, after 6 p.m. What kind of signal is that to tens of thousands of employees? It's just look, first 10 years, first company, like as now a self-made millionaire, like I have more grace and I take more time off and I give that grace to other people. But when I'm early days and I'm busting my ass and trying to prove myself, nothing comes first other than my job.
Right.
But
Okay.
that's
So
me.
how?
That's me. That's what worked for
Yeah.
me.
Right. And I guess it goes right into. I guess there's been a lot more publicity, I guess, and stuff talked around or talking around mental health and
Yes,
kind of
absolutely.
what can you do to kind of balance to get those outlets for the
I
stress
had
because
panic
you're not
attacks.
just
Yeah. I had panic attacks running social. I remember one of my board members who I had a pretty rough and tumble relationship with. I got a panic attack one time when he called me. Literally. I had a situation on the board where they wanted to get rid of me
Mhm.
uh, because they didn't think I was performing well. We kept missing plan. Um, and I think mental health is certainly important. But now that it's out more in the open, there are avenues to address it.
Mhm.
And there's research that shows whatever you got to do. Like I started taking anti-anxiety pills, and I've lowered that dosage since that. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm not saying go take meds. I'm
No.
saying, get your mental health in check, but understand that what you're signing up for. And that's why it's not for everybody. That's why I say, like, most people want to be entrepreneurs. I'm like, don't do it. You gotta be built for it. And unlike some people who say it's learned, I don't think it's learned. I think it's a skill you're born with.
Yeah. I mean, that is a
A bit
debate for
contrarian, but
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's got their perspective. And I feel like, are you doing things besides meds? I just want to make sure you're okay.
Yeah, just go get meds. Look,
No.
I at the time I wasn't. Yeah. Look, that's just like the basic shit. Like I went to the gym.
Yeah.
I,
Okay.
you
Yeah.
know, I I had partners that were supportive. I don't know. I
Right.
ate.
Right.
I can tell you all the basic shit, but like at the end of the day,
Yeah.
again, it's not for the faint of heart. And I think that like all this encouragement to be an entrepreneur. Like if you're, a lot, and it's just the word is thrown around. I did not call myself an entrepreneur, Frank, until I sold my business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like,
You're a founder and you're a CEO, right?
that's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And now I'm not comfortable calling myself a serial entrepreneur, even though I'm now my third company. I started a cleaning company while in my downtime, and I'm not
Yeah.
serial. Sure, I'm a serial entrepreneur. You can call me that. I'm not going to call myself that.
I'll call you a serial entrepreneur. All right. So moving along here, is there anything else you wanted to share, talk about as we're here? Actually, you're in Boise. What brought you out there? Curious.
During COVID, I did a road trip with a few friends, and we covered 15,000 miles along during throughout 4 months. And it was one of the cities we visited last. I fell in love with it and decided to experiment with living here. And now I'm 4 years after that.
Great. Yeah. We used to do Tech Cocktail Boise. I don't know if you knew
Did you
that.
really?
Years ago. Yes.
Wow.
Really early, like 2010.
Do you
Yeah.
remember any companies that were there?
I'd have to go look back. Top of my
Dude,
head.
you've seen so many business. It's insane.
Oh yeah.
How many
T
companies have you seen? What?
Oh, thousands, tens of thousands. Yeah, tens of thousands. T-Sheets was one that
Of
did
course.
very well out of Boise.
Tragic what
Yeah,
happened.
very much. Yeah, very much
Yeah,
so.
very sad.
Yeah. So okay. So I think before we wrap here, is there anything else you wanted to kind of highlight, talk about,
No,
uh,
I mean,
share with the audience?
an honor to be with you. I've been a fan since day one. So grateful for everything you've done for entrepreneurship and startups. And yeah, I mean, people want to check out my book. If people want free chapters, get in touch with me, connect with me
How
on
can they find
social.
you? Drop that
Uh,
URL again. What's the name of
uh,
what's the
my name.com. So Dan spelled Don. That's Don spelled Dan. Dan J like in Joseph Berger, Berger.com, or on any of the kind
Okay,
of.
and I have to ask you, why do you go by Don and not Dan?
It's a Hebrew name. So in Hebrew is Dan.
Yeah.
And the anglicized version of it is Dan, but I always felt that was a little bit kind of like not me.
Hmm.
So
I was curious, just
yeah,
curious.
yeah.
I've had to correct our team several times, like, no, it's Don. And they're like, no, it's spelled Dan. I'm like, no, it's Don. So that's why
You
I
idiot.
yeah, right. Get it. Okay, so before we wrap there, one piece of advice or mantra that you think anybody that's out there that's a founder or business leader should take, keep top of mind as they're out there building successful teams, fostering collaboration, and so forth. Like, is there a mantra you live by? Is there
Well,
like a mantra you like every day I wake up and I'm like, not every day
yeah,
I'm listening, but
yeah.
something, it's something like that, I guess.
Well, I mean, on the back of my wall, I have a Stephen Blank, who's like the forefather of startups,
Mhm.
uh, signed my social table sticker, reading fail fast and often, but that's kind of cheesy. But mine is probably a quote from Vanilla Sky, which is every passing day is an opportunity to turn it all around. Um, so I think a lot about that and about, I've been in recovery now 4 months, and I think about, taking one day at a time. I have on one of my tattoos is work in progress. So it's just like,
Congrats on that too. I mean, I used to have a company called Tech Cocktail and I don't really drink anymore.
yeah,
So goes to show you like,
the proverbial cocktail.
right. Exactly. But it does, yeah, obviously you mentioned earlier, even that trend. That's a good one. I think I like that quote too, because every day is a fresh day. And I think even some of your hardest days, when you do have that stress, my reset was always like, go to sleep.
Yeah.
Like, go to sleep, wake up, it's gonna be a new day, and you've got a fresh start, and you'll think about it differently.
Yeah.
Because
My mom always said to me every day is a school day. And that was one of the social table's core values and people loved it. And
Mhm,
that's kind of like the same thing. It's like, yeah, I mean, I think, the documentary Stutz, where Jonah Hill kind of interviews his therapist on Netflix.
mhm.
He says life's purpose is the work. And I really like that as well. It's kind of like
That's a
all,
good one too.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one because you know some of it's been glamorized, right? Entrepreneurship in general, and it's really hard.
Yeah.
It's it's really hard. So a lot
I
of
almost
credit.
think about like the sign, like keep out. Yeah,
It's so
I'm
friendly,
yeah,
welcoming,
yeah, no, no, not.
and
It's not
for a
hospi
hospitality
no
guy.
hospitality. No, no, no. I'm welcome everybody, but it's just don't become an entrepreneur unless you're freaking.
Oh, right. Yeah, I know, I get it. Yeah, no, there's a lot to that, and I appreciate you sharing that perspective because, like, I've always think like if you've gotten a startup idea, you should start it and get it going. But you're right, like along the way, you may realize it's not the right thing for you.
Totally. And
And
that's such
so,
a what a I mean, what a privilege to try something and realize that, you know?
And it is, but it takes a little self-awareness to realize maybe this isn't right for me, or maybe it's not right for your team, or maybe it's not the right, you saw it early on, maybe it wasn't right for your co-founder
That's right.
at the time. And so definitely some lessons learned there. And I appreciate you sharing everything here today. For all those listeners out there, thank you for being here. Obviously this is the show for today, but if you do have a startup idea and you want to get it going, I encourage you to get it going. And if you need help, though, come to us at Start of the Year and join our community, and hopefully we can help you kind of get that spark and continue it along the way. So thanks so much, Don. Appreciate you for being here.
Thank you, Frank.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Startup of the Year podcast. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll be back with another episode soon.